This week, millionaires are moving all over the world, and we give you a simple checklist to find out if your bookkeeper is really keeping your books. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancock, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. So, in the end, we did get a porky surprise, didn't we, Claire? We got the porky surprise that we really wanted. What happened?
More ways than one, I think, didn't we?
So, yes, we found our porky surprise in a chapel, didn't we?
Yes, in a little...
randomly.
In Wales, or a little village in Wales.
So last week we were talking about, was it last week or the week before, we were talking about the 5 pigs where we expected the best sausage and it was disappointing. And actually, we got the best sausage we got was in a converted chapel by an aqueduct in Wales for a fantastic breakfast.
Not just any aqueduct, though. The world's highest passable aqueduct. Quite something, really.
All right, for everybody. Where is it if they want to go?
I don't know how to say it. It's spelled Llangollen, but I think you say it Clanglong or something. Yeah, my Welsh needs some work.
Anyway, in true holiday style, we went into this lovely converted chapel for a bit of breakfast before we went out to go there. And the only thing you could comment on was how they could have fitted more tables in there as a business. I mean, we're supposed to be having a little break.
No, my brain never switches off. I always like to think about how a business could be better. And yeah, there was just so much wasted floor space. These tables were humongous. And like most of the tables were for like groups of 6 and they were taken up by just couples. And yeah, that definitely, I mean, it was a good little business. I'm sure it was turning over some good money, but was it profitable as it could be?
We're going to
Probably
talk
not.
next week, aren't we, about a concept for quickly analysing your business. And we're going to do it on a few of them, aren't we? So we'll just pause there because we're going to use the cafe next week in next week's episode. But for this week, let's find out what's been going on in the news and this week's news story of the week. So this week, I want to talk about the exodus or the movement of millionaires around the world. And this is obviously the drums are beating on the back of the upcoming budget on the 30th of October. There's a lot in the news about how a crackdown on those with the broadest shoulders, as Keir puts it, would drive people out of the UK. And on the back of that, there was a story from Charlie Mullings, the Pimlico plumber, who's now said, I've had enough, I'm off. And he's currently in the process of putting his £18 million London home on the market and permanently moving to Marbella in Spain. He's also looking at getting residency in Dubai as well.
And whilst we might not quite fit into the category of the super wealthy millionaires and billionaires, we're contemplating going, aren't we? We've been looking at properties in Tenerife, properties in Madeira and Portugal. So, yeah.
It's less for our pitiful tax savings and
more
more
for
just
the sunshine,
for the weather. But
the tax savings,
there's good options. But that's the challenge, isn't it? You've got both the weather, the all-round light, plus if you then give them a disincentive to do it from a tax perspective, you're a bit screwed. So anyway, the main news story I've read this week is from a company called Henley & Partners that have forecasted out for the rest of this year the movement in millionaires in and out of various countries around the world. So what I wanted to do is, because some of it's surprising and some of it's not surprising, is to quiz you, Claire, on the top 5 countries in the world that have attracted the most millionaires, and then what that number is, and the top 5 countries that have lost millionaires, and what those numbers are. So should we start with the positives? Top 5 countries that have attracted millionaires. So who's in number 1? And this is an easy one, I'm sure.
That have attracted millionaires?
Yes, the most millionaires that have moved into its country.
Dubai,
UAE at 6,700 by a long, long way. Second to that, I don't think you'd get this one necessarily. I'm not sure I would.
Well, I know this probably more than you would think I was going to know this. So I know that actually Europe still remains quite a hotspot for people, for countries being attracted. And I think that says something about, people complain about a lot of the regulation that we have, but there's a reason why.
Okay,
I think the next 3 countries...
there's no European countries in the top 5, so we'll move on from there.
I would have said Switzerland, Portugal,
There's not. So
and
we'll
maybe Italy.
So number 2 was the USA. As you'd expect, one of the big global superpowers, fantastic. 3,800 entered the USA, 6,700 entered the UAE. Number 3 was Singapore, with 3,500. Okay. Number 4 was Canada, with 3,200. And number 5 was Australia, with 2,500.
Are these predicted or actual? Because I think if you looked at last year's results...
These are run rates for this year predicted out, yeah.
I think if you looked at last year's results, I think you would find more European countries in that, actually.
Interesting. So anyway, let's move on to the key news story. So what are the bottom 5? So
this is...
The very bottom one is a big number. It's 15,200 people have left this country that are millionaires. So that's nearly 3 times the volume that have entered Dubai. So it's a big
China.
number. It is China. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They're losing millionaires at a rate of knots. And I'm guessing that's just because they're gaining domestic millionaires at a rate of knots that are opening up the world to be able to... They have one of the largest growing middle classes in the world, don't they?
I read a staggering statistic about China the other day. The Chinese government, obviously, is a communist state, and the government, they pretty much control everything. And the amount of house building that they've gone on over the past 10, 20 years is off the charts. And I don't think, sometimes we get a little bit stuck in our little UK bubble and we don't realise how big China and these other countries are really in the world. But they said that they've built so many homes in China that there are currently 60 million new build properties that are just sitting empty because they can't find anyone to build them. And I was just thinking, we keep going on about this house building shortage that the UK's got, but I thought, China's got 60 million homes. That's nearly one home for every person that lives in the UK just sitting there empty in China that's unsellable because they don't have the economic structure behind it to support it. People can't get the finance, they can't afford the finance, they don't want to move to the cities yet because they are literally just mega cities of houses. It's staggering.
But this was in pure contradiction to another fact, wasn't it? Wasn't it? We talked about, I can't remember if it was the price of housing in China or something, but it was polar opposite to that stat. Something ridiculous. You would expect with oversupply, there would be a collapse in prices, and there wasn't. House prices have gone up stupid number versus the supply. I can't remember. If you can't remember, then this is a pointless conversation.
I think it was in Beijing or something that house prices had gone something crazy,
insane.
20 times higher in the last 10 years or something. But it's because China have built completely new towns and cities, but people don't really want to live there. There's no jobs there. There's no structure.
The jobs and everything around. They've just literally whacked up some houses, and that doesn't work like that. It's the problem we've got in the UK. There's no point building a load of houses up north where the opportunities are and people don't want to live. It's a problem. Okay, we've gone off on a tangent there, but China,
Russia, obviously people will be exiting Russia.
Russia is number 5 with only 1,000.
I'm not going to get them in order, but I can probably at least get the top 5.
The difference is massive. So only 1,000 people. Russia's lost only 1,000 millionaires. China 15,200. Who's number 2 at 9,500?
The UK.
The UK, yes, by a big chunk. So 9,500 predicted to leave the UK this year. In number 3 is India with 4,300, and South Korea's number 4 with 1,200. So I think, that is a run rate with the Finnish prediction for this year, and not even really taking account for any disastrous budgetary things that come out that drive that number even higher. But I think, from my perspective, it's a fact that 80% of millionaires are self-made in the UK. That's a number that's often bounded about because people expect that people that are wealthy are generationally wealthy, but actually they're not. 80% of us self-mades. These are people that are incredibly smart, incredibly hard-working people. It's very difficult within your lifetime to become a millionaire, and I think it's a sad state of affairs to try those people out.
I did a post about this on LinkedIn actually and got quite a mixed bag of reactions about this whole statement about those with the broader shoulders. And I just thought, do you know what? It's I immediately thought of somebody that had been to the gym and built these really big bulky shoulders, and I thought that's never an overnight thing. Nobody's born with big shoulders. Okay, there are a handful of people that are naturally born and they've got massive shoulders, or money terms, they're born with wealth. But like you say, the vast majority of people, that isn't their situation, and they have those broad shoulders over years and years, often decades of sacrifice and hard work and risk taking, and they've probably gone through some really shit times in their life because of the path they've chosen. They've missed family events, they've missed important things, they've sacrificed relationships. They've probably lost important relationships as well because, at times they've prioritised their work. And somebody like Keir Starmer comes along and just says, oh, you've worked really hard to get those broad shoulders, so now you can carry more weight. And there's
a very famous saying, I read it all the time. I think it's been hashed up a number of times, but it's something along the lines of everybody wants my lifestyle and my wealth, but they don't want the life I've had to lead to get here.
Yeah.
and something around those type of things. But it's the true thing. People only ever look at the end result, don't they? And that's the reality.
I mean, it was Margaret Thatcher that famously said the problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money. And without getting too deep into politics, we can see that's what's going on here.
Just to correspond, the story underneath this one was all about GDP, and obviously we keep claiming that we're still running as one of the best in the G7, but just very quickly, just goes to show what the trend looks like from the 60s through to the 2020s. In the 60s, our average GDP was 2.8% a year, 70s and 80s 2.5, 90s 1.9, and since the turn of the millennium, around 1%. So, the slow in the growth of our economy, that disappearing of great minds and great driven people that want to drive business, it could cause us some real problems.
It's interesting because big businesses, generally, when you work, really big businesses, like people that are turning over like billions, if not like hundreds of millions and billions, when you're doing like your annual budgets and things like that, your targets will often be GDP plus a bit of a stretch. So I know from working in the corporate world that, if we had GDP of 2%, then we'd probably have a target to grow by 2.5%. Yeah. And what we'd call organic growth. So that's without acquisitions, that's without new investment to drive growth. And so if big businesses are only trying to grow by 1%, when you can go and put your money in the bank and get 5% return on it, it doesn't make any sense. That incentive to take a risk and do something other than just park your money in a safe place. It's just
when you look at it like that, it's crazy, isn't it? Like if you can get 4 or 5% in real safe assets, why do the risky stuff if you're going to beat GDP by 3% anyway by just putting it in some property or some other stocks? It's a crazy way of looking at it. And actually, when the very smart people click onto that, and as a lot of them do, and think, why am I doing this? That is a recipe for absolute disaster for a country. I know where I'd want to be. I'd want to be the country that's pulling in those people, those great brains from places like the UK, from China, and on that list, like Australia and the UAE. But anyway, fascinating stuff. I'm sure there'll be lots more of it during this 5-year tenure of this government, but we'll see where it ends at the end of it. They've obviously got a plan, so let's see how it plays out. Let's move on to this week's deep dive, where this week we're going to talk about, is your bookkeeper really keeping your books? So Claire, what do you mean by, is your bookkeeper really keeping your books?
Well, this is something that comes up with, I would say, I want to be as bold to say every single customer that comes to me. And they come to me typically because they want, like reporting and information to help them grow. And that's what we specialise in. And they'll say, I've got a bookkeeper, I've got a year-end accountant, and they're taking care of everything, but I just need some help with that finance director side of things and the reporting and the analysis. And the first thing we always do is we have a look at their bookkeeping and we look at their accounts, because at the end of the day, the analysis that we do can only be based off typically what's in Xero or what's in Sage. And we often find that their bookkeeping system is just riddled with mistakes, inaccuracies, things that have been missed, things that have not been managed. And this is because, unfortunately, a lot of bookkeepers, but also, business owners having never worked in a finance department, don't understand what processes and procedures should be followed, and therefore they're not in a position to challenge their bookkeeper and say, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay?
Okay.
And what we tend to find is that the bookkeepers are fantastic at day-to-day stuff. So they're posting the transactions, they're keeping the bank rec done, they're getting all the invoices posted, and they're keeping that side of things done. But there's a lot more to keeping the books than just posting transactions. And this is often what's missed by everybody, business owners, bookkeepers, accountants, everything.
Okay. So obviously this is a fairly big issue, and there isn't a quick fix to it. But what you've got here to give some value back to our listeners is a little bit of a quick check, a quick overhaul that they can do as the business owner to say, are things broadly where they need to be, or have I got some alarm bells that I need to look at and need to delve a bit deeper, haven't you?
Yeah.
Perfect. And that revolves mainly around the balance sheet.
Yeah. And this is always, I say,
how many business owners do you think would know what a balance sheet is?
I think
or how to find it? Should we start with that?
I think people are comfortable where to find it, because you can run a report in your system. So it's fairly easy to find it. And you can generally look at it and be comfortable with, some of the key numbers on there. Like you'll see it if you've got stock on there, you'll see your cash balance on there, things like that. But it's understanding the link between that and your profit and loss or your cash flow statement. And this is really common that people say to me, they're like, oh, my bookkeepers, they'll run me my P&L, they'll call them the management accounts. So basically what they tend to do is actually just download the P&L and the balance sheet and the cash flow out of Xero and send it on to the business owner and say, here's your management accounts. And that, unfortunately, that's not really management accounts at all. That's just downloading reports.
So what is management accounts then?
Management accounts is putting context and information behind those. Just having the statements alone is not enough. So
it's like an executive summary of
absolutely.
Rather than just simply here's the P&L.
Yeah, so don't get me wrong, that is a set of management accounts, but there's no value in that. What business owners really need is somebody to be casting their expert eye over their management accounts. So a finance person to be looking at those management accounts and saying, okay, we've spotted these trends, these numbers are out of kilter, these numbers are too low, these numbers are too high, and this is what we recommend you do.
So in exactly the same way and reason that when I buy a house, I don't do the conveyancing myself. I get a solicitor to interpret the contracts, interpret the information that's coming through, and put it and tell me in plain English what that means to me and how to navigate that. That's the same difference with what you would do with a P&L.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example. So having your management accounts just sent to you, just the numbers report, is like having a legal contract just land in your inbox, and it's then down to you to decipher it.
You can't understand how it's written.
And don't get me wrong, it's definitely a skill that business owners should improve on, and they should get to the point where they have a basic understanding of it. But, at the end of the day, it took me about 7 years to study to be a chartered accountant. So there's a reason you do that 7 years of study. So there is a lot more to it than what initially meets the eye.
Yeah, I think this is about, I do think that people do need to self-educate themselves to take themselves to a certain level. And that's all about making sure that they're not getting the wool pulled over their eyes by their accountant, their bookkeeper, or whoever that is. But they only need to have that so far that they can spot the things. A bit like what you're about to talk through, these spotting things. Anyway, so should we move on to the actual checks and the things that business owners can do?
Let's talk about probably the easiest check that a business owner could do. And I would say that would be with their VAT. So I am working through this with 2 businesses at the moment, actually. And it's exactly the same scenario. So when you run your VAT return and you submit your VAT return, you'll get a number. And let's just say that number says that you owe HMRC 15 grand for your quarter. Yeah. If you go and look at your balance sheet for, say, the end of quarter 2, is that number the same? And I'm working with 2 businesses at the moment. One business, that number's like £100,000 difference.
Okay. And
another business, that number's about £18,000 difference. So somewhere along the line, for some reason, there's been something wrong in Xero. Somebody's done something they shouldn't have done. Somebody set something up wrong. Those 2 numbers have got out of sync. And that's a red flag, because firstly, those 2 numbers should never be out of sync. They should be the same. Yep. But it's then thinking, okay, which number's right?
Okay. Yeah.
Have we underpaid HMRC? Have we overpaid HMRC? Have we sent the wrong VAT return? Like, if the VAT return is correct, but it's our balance sheet that's wrong, then what else on our balance sheet is therefore wrong because of it?
Okay, so step number 1 is to check those 2 numbers and to ask the question, why, if the 2 numbers don't match. I don't want to go into too much detail in it because obviously we've got a lot to get through quite quickly, but that's a quick thing. It's just start to question. It's a why. Why to your bookkeeper, see what your bookkeeper says.
I think that's the basic premise of what we're saying here about the balance sheet is. And this is something that if you have worked in a bigger company that has an annual audit, then this is something that you do meticulously, is every single number on your balance sheet, you'll have some sort of supporting documentation for it. So if in the simplest of terms, we've just said, okay, your VAT balance on your balance sheet, check it to your VAT return, is it the same number? You'll have a bank balance on there, check it to your actual physical bank statement, is it the same number? If you've got stock on your balance sheet, when was the last time you did a stock count? Compare it to your stock count number. So you can start to see how this is really, really easy to actually do, because we're not asking you as a business owner to go and do any complicated calculations or anything like that. We're just simply saying, check those numbers. Now, actually, that is part of keeping the books. That is a big part of keeping the books and making sure your books are accurate. Because if any single one of those numbers on your balance sheet is wrong, your profit and loss is wrong, but more importantly, your cash flow statement is wrong. Is
this where the saying balancing your books comes from?
Absolutely.
So that is the core job of the bookkeeper, to ultimately, after they've done all of the administration work, to ultimately work out how to balance the books. Yeah. As we say.
And I talk a lot about, some of the shortcomings of some of the bookkeepers and accountants out there. And don't get me wrong, there are some really shoddy people out there that just simply shouldn't be providing professional services. But the reality is that the vast majority of bookkeepers in particular that are providing services have done qualifications that are unfortunately quite easy to get. And you can self-study them and get a little bit of work experience and then start selling your services. So even people that say I'm a qualified bookkeeper, actually most of their training is aimed around managing the tax side of things and the compliance with HMRC. So, when to file a self-assessment tax return and when to file a VAT return and things like that. It's not actually about managing this integrity of the books. And even then, most of the training for bookkeepers is aimed at these really small micro companies. And so as soon as you get a business that, does 6 figures and over, really you should have quite a comprehensive, just a checklist every month. So all of my team have it. We have it in place for all of the companies that we do the bookkeeping for. We have a checklist and, checking something like the VAT balance. We're not going to do that every month. We're going to do that quarterly. Yeah. And checking our stock balance. We might say we don't do it monthly. We do it bi-monthly. So you just sort of need to identify where the biggest risks are for your business, what numbers could have the biggest impact if they were wrong. Decide how frequently you want to check it. Is it weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever's right for your business? And you just put that schedule in place and your bookkeeper does it.
So what happens if these things are not right? I can see, business owners that don't understand and say, well, I've employed a professional to do it. If I get caught out and, what are the worst case scenarios? Unpaid VAT bills, fines, whatever else. Does that liability sit with the bookkeeper then because they not balance the books, or where does that liability sit? How important is this to the business owner?
This is the unfortunate thing, is that if you look at, firstly, every bookkeeper should be issuing you with the scope of works. You should have a contract that says exactly what they do. And unfortunately, if you looked at that contract, then that probably is going to say that they post your invoices, they do your bank reconciliations, and they submit your VAT returns. There's probably not going to be anything in there about doing these checks, because most bookkeepers don't know how to do this. They've never been trained in this. So it is what I would say is more like a senior bookkeeper role. So a lot of bookkeepers just simply won't even know that this is a thing themselves.
So do you think in a lot of businesses that this really, really important piece of work, i.e. balancing the books, is just
completely missed,
just not happening?
The bookkeepers don't know it's a thing. The business owners don't know it's a thing. Then the business owner thinks the bookkeeper's got everything under control. And actually, most of this normally comes out in the wash if you then send your accounts to a year-end accountant.
Right.
And they might have questions and queries that says, can I have the supporting evidence, such as a bank statement?
Right, so the year-end accountant starts to do the mop-up. But at which point, the mop-up becomes very messy and time-consuming for the business owner to correct and try and play catch up, rather than having this process where it's being done every month really, really efficiently and on as it should be.
And a mop-up for a tiny business is fine, but you can't have a mop-up in a business where you're potentially moving your numbers by tens, if not hundreds of thousands, because that's tens, if not hundreds of thousands that your profit has potentially been out all year and your cash flow's been out all year and you didn't know. And those, that type of thing could all of a sudden, you could be in a loss-making business when you thought you were in a profit-making business. And so that's why, as your business grows, and I would say it's good practice, every business should do this, but realistically, businesses maybe 500k plus, what I would say is a month-end schedule should be an absolute priority that this is in place, because if you don't have this in place, you might as well not bother looking at your P&L and your cash flow forecast, because you just have no idea if it's correct. And you'll be making decisions off of incorrect information. You could take your business in completely the wrong direction because the information is incorrect.
So, top tip for business owners, because I like this, I'm going to do this. A simple one with this: create yourself a checklist now, a monthly checklist that you're going to sit down and you go through. It's going to have on there, let's just quickly read through these that they should have on the checklist. So the bank balance, you're going to check your bank balance and compare it to your physical bank statement on the balance sheet. You're going to check your stock. When was your stock last counted? Prepayments.
Yeah, so prepayments is where you pay for things in advance and they're for a long time period. So typically, like insurance, you might pay up front, but it's for 12 months. And your bookkeeper will do like an adjustment every month to spread the cost over the 12 months.
Yeah,
they should be able to give you a schedule and say, this is everything that we've got in prepayment. So you understand what your commitments are for the rest of the year.
Got that. And then you've got your VAT liability, which you've talked in detail about, which is just comparing that against your last VAT return. Corporation tax liability, again, most systems will tell you that. Yeah,
so corporation tax, PAYE, and also VAT. Actually, I listened to a YouTube video the other day, and it was somebody talking about a business that they'd worked with, and the bookkeeper had been saying that they'd been paying all the taxes over to HMRC, but actually they'd been stealing the money.
I saw that.
Yeah. And if somebody had just logged on to the HMRC online systems and checked the balance on the system, something would have popped up and we would have said this is wrong. So with all your HMRC stuff, I would always say just log on to the HMRC system and compare that number to what your system says. Are those two numbers the same? Because they should be.
Yeah. And then you've got finance agreements and checking them against actual statements of those finance agreements.
Yeah, and I'd say finance agreements, actually finance agreements are quite technical when it comes to putting the postings through your books. Yeah. And this is probably one of the areas that I see the most mistakes made by bookkeepers and accounts people, because they don't understand how to record the interest and the additional fees and things like that. So it just ends up really messy. So that's really important to check those.
Fine. And then finally, fixed assets.
Yes. So making sure that your assets are not overvalued. So have you got all the assets if you think on your books that you've got £10,000 of assets, you should have a list to support that.
Yeah.
So is that made up of 5 computers and a couple of mobile phones and things like that? It's like, have you still got all of that equipment? Is it valued correctly? Have you got rid of some of it? Have you got new stuff?
Yep.
This is also super, super important, because if you want to get finance, making sure that your books are accurate is incredibly important. You can't have these big swings going through at year end when you come to apply for finance. Then you realise, oh, my business isn't in as good a shape and now I can't get finance.
Okay, great. So you've heard it. Do that today. If you're big enough that you can afford somebody else to do this for you, of the right level and caliber, then by all means do that. But for other directors, it's a basic level of due diligence. It's a tick box exercise. Go in, put it in your diary every month, at least every quarter, and just say, I'm going to dive in. I'm going to spend an hour, probably won't even take an hour. I'm going to check a number of these numbers, and I'm just going to ask that big question, why?
If you would like this list as well, just drop me an email and I will be happy to share my month-end list with you, and you can give that to your bookkeeper. You can give that to your bookkeeper and ask them to do these checks, even if it's just a one-off.
Yeah.
And you say, can you check all of these? I want you to show me the number that's in Xero, Sage, whatever system it is you use, and then I want you to show me the number on the supporting statement. And we just have like a simple Excel spreadsheet and we put screenshots of both in. So we know those numbers match, and that's our evidence to say we've done that, and then that just gets signed off on our business and we shut the books down for the month.
Amazing. That'd be really helpful. So who can they email? What's the email address?
info@profitcashgrowth.com is probably the easiest one to use, and just ask for the month-end tick list and I'll send it through.
Can I have the month-end checklist that you use? We'll send a template out to you guys, and anyone wants to use it, just get implementing it. This is, some of these liabilities can be massive if they get out of control. This is well up there with direct due diligence. It's worth doing.
100%. So not only will this affect you, because running your business day to day, you've got to know how your business is performing so you can make smart decisions, but it will affect you if you try and get a finance agreement. It affects your year end, how much tax you pay at year end if something's wrong in your books.
I dare say that even if you do have a finance manager or somebody a bit more managerial in the finance function of your business, check them as well, because I've worked in businesses where I'm not even convinced that some people at that level would be on these numbers in the same way.
Absolutely.
It's worth doing. Be responsible for your business.
So even if you take the checklist, give it to your accountant or your bookkeeper and ask them just to do it as a one-off exercise, so you understand, were you okay for, 7 out of 10 of them or something like that? You'll at least have an idea of how good your finance processes are, and have you got everything in place that you need to have in place for a business of your size.
Amazing. So that's info@profitcashgrowth.com if you want that checklist. And let's move on to this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra. So this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra is one that I'm sure everybody else uses, but I've not massively adopted. I don't think you use massively, but you're starting to use more and more. And that's just basically using voice notes, isn't it? To be a bit more efficient with tapping and various other things. Because you use Microsoft Teams, you use WhatsApp, we use lots of different tools. I was never a fan of voice notes. My team always use them, and
I think you love them or you hate them. They're a bit Marmite, aren't they?
I sometimes find them a bit cringy because my team always use it, and I always feel like you've got to play them out loud, and it's really difficult because you don't want everyone else to hear what's going on if you're in an office environment, whatever else. But actually, if you just get over yourself and embrace it, it's just dead quick, and you get more information out in a really short space of time to somebody, more clarity in your communication. So I think it's really, really quite good. It's a bit dictatorial, I think, because it is basically like a phone call, but no one can talk back. Well, they kind of can, but it's very staccato, isn't it? So to speak.
I have some clients that are not very good on email, and I find the clients that are not good on email are great on WhatsApp, in particular voice notes, and they leave me a lot of voice notes and send me little messages all the time. And I would rather just somebody communicate with me in any way that they're comfortable with.
You've got just drop me a quick. We're like that. It's just drop us a one-liner. Just say, this is done. This is this. Just if everyone knows, if the team knows, we just know where we are with it. I think it's great, whether it's by voice note or just by WhatsApp or text.
I would say I don't really send random voice notes to customers unless they have sent me a voice note, so I know that they're comfortable with that. I wouldn't just randomly start sending somebody voice notes, but when somebody does send me voice notes, I'm more than happy to communicate like that.
Do you feel like, is that a barrier that says, I don't feel like this is professional? Is that what's the barrier to you the first time you do it with a client? Because I feel like it's a bit like, it's quite an informal, it feels like an informal form of communication, but I think we live in a world of informal communication. Gone are the days of the formalities.
I don't think it's necessarily like the professionalism of it. I just think some people feel very it's like being on camera or speaking in public. It's those types of things. I couldn't give a hoot. I think my voice sounds terrible, but nobody's listening to me because of the lovely tones of my voice. So from that perspective, I don't care. No. It's much more like it's quick and easy. But if other people, I don't want to send somebody a voice note and then them become all flustered about, oh my God, I've got to send a voice note back and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I wait for them to make the first move. But if anyone wants to send me voice notes, then I'll always respond to them if you've got some questions.
Yeah, we don't mind anyway. Well, thanks for tuning in to another week's podcast. Again, some vital information there from Claire and a little freebie there with the checklist. Remember, it's info@profitcashgrowth.com. If you want the checklist from Claire, do catch up with us again next week. We're going to be talking to you about a little tip in quickly analysing yours and other people's businesses. And don't forget to rate, review and subscribe if you like us. And if you feel like you've outgrown your accounts and you'd like to chat with Claire and the team, you can visit the website profitcashgrowth.com, the YouTube channel, or of course just drop us an email. And we'll see you next week. Bye bye.